Hello again, everyone. It's time for another Federal Tax Updates podcast. This is Roger Harris, and I'm joined by my sidekick and partner in this, Annie Schwab from stormy Dallas, Texas, I hear. So
Yes, it is.
hopefully the thunder and lightning won't interrupt our podcast today. Thanks to everyone for listening. We're excited to have you listening to our podcast today because we have another really exciting guest, as we have done almost all our recent podcasts, which is great for us because I'm sure you'd rather listen to other people besides, well, I won't speak for Annie, but me. So, Annie, how about introducing our guest for today's podcast?
Sure, be my pleasure. Today we have Giles Pearson with us, and he's a chartered accountant from New Zealand with 25 years of public accounting experience, including 18 years as a partner with PwC New Zealand. He specializes in tax and private businesses. During his time as partner, he realized the difficulty firms had in understanding the hiring options available to them. So he joined and co-founded Accountests in 2016, expanding the business from New Zealand to Australia, UK, and the US. Giles has a strong interest in improving accounting as a profession, someplace that college students will want to begin their career. So it is my pleasure to welcome Giles to our Federal Tax Updates podcast. Giles, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Andy and Roger. It's great to be here and great to be talking about tax again, which I don't get to talk about too often. So this is cool.
Yeah. Are you back in New Zealand? And if so, what time and what day is it? I mean, it's about
Right.
4 o'clock on 4 o'clock. It doesn't matter what day it is, but it's a Monday. So how are you ahead of? You're ahead of us, I guess.
Yeah, we're ahead. So it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning.
Well, I wish I could ask you who was going to win some games or something, if you already know. I'm sure you've done that before. Thank you. This is a really great topic because the industry has faced hiring challenges for a number of years, and if you're going to go through that process, you want to try to make sure you get it right. And Giles has come up with a way to help. Nothing's perfect, but to help make it better. So. I guess kind of what made you start this idea? Was it just the general challenges with hiring, or how did you go from taxes to testing?
Yeah, that's right. Look, and we've all got there's always a seminal moment that is the thing that causes you to do something.
Right.
And we'd had frustrations for, as all firms do, for hiring people who turned out to be not what was on the tin. But I had this particular experience, which again is probably not that uncommon, where we hired this person who they interviewed great. We really connected at interview. Their resume was exactly what we were looking for, and I really liked this person. They started with us, and it was just a train wreck, and we just couldn't work out what it was that we'd got wrong. But accountants are always a bit slow of perhaps making those hard decisions. That's one of the things that we're not that necessarily that good at. We're conflict avoiders generally. So we struggled on with this person for some time, and it was a miserable experience for us and for them. And eventually we had to let them go. And I guess it was that particular moment that it was like, surely there's a better way. And you'd have thought PwC would have all the measures in place for these sorts of things, and they don't, and they didn't, and I suspect they still don't, because this is not the way that firms have traditionally thought about hiring. It's been a really sort of, if you like, a lax process. So we went out looking for some testing that we could use, skills tests. Show me that you can do in this case, it was like a staff accountant sort of level. Show me that you're at staff accountant level, and we just couldn't find anything. We trawled the world looking for testing, and so that was a bit of a light bulb moment. It's like, surely somebody should create something that if I want to test for, a staff accountant or a tax senior or whatever, I can just pick one off the shelf and deliver it to them with the knowledge that it's actually going to work. And that it's the science is there, and I've got my legal stuff covered and all the rest of it. And so that was the genesis, I guess, of the idea to start Accountests.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people submit a resume or post their resume online, and you have a couple of conversations and interview, maybe several people talk to them, and then it's sort of like you roll the dice. You think you might be a good fit, but you're right, without some sort of testing of knowledge or personality, or how they would fit with the firm culture, what their strengths or their weaknesses are. It's really hard to know if the candidate's right or not right, and it's extremely expensive to pick the wrong candidate, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Well, that's right. And CPA Practice Advisor did a really interesting survey. It's probably about 18 months ago now, but I'm sure it hasn't changed, about how many people lie on their resumes. And it's surprising. And actually the highest, the people who lie the most are the most qualified. Maybe they've got more to lie about. But
Yeah.
it's literally 80 or 90% of people lie on their resumes, and most of them do it all the time. And it's a question of sort of what is lying and what's what's a
Right.
stretching of the truth, if you're talking about your experience, or the sort of work that you've done. But resumes, I think, particularly with AI, makes it even worse. Resumes
yeah.
are really nothing but I'm telling you that I'm sort of in your ballpark, but it's for you to find out.
Yeah, I guess other than like a degree, or you are a CPA, or you are an EA, or you graduated with a master's of, everything else is just sort of fluff, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems ridiculous, because I remember being so particular with my resume, but you're right, with AI and the competitive market in certain fields, I can see how people fudge a little.
And it would
Well,
seem to me, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, if you've got kids, and my kids are the age when they're applying for jobs. What do? They get their resume, they get the job description for the job that they're applying for, and they put them into AI, and they go, make my resume look more like this job description.
Yeah. No, the AI can make you look perfect for almost any job, whether you're
Right.
qualified or not. And I think that one of the problems, and I know I'm guilty of, and I think a lot of people, we're not particularly great interviewers. So, we're not able to probe to really try to find out what's AI and what's the truth. And I'm assuming these tests. Well, first of all, I'm shocked that there wasn't. I'm like you. I would have assumed there's a test somewhere, that I can use or modify or do whatever. Uh, but with the test, probably digs deeper and better into the candidate than someone who's not a skilled interviewer. They're just going to really ask you to verify what's on your resume.
Well, that's right. I think there's different tests for different things, and there's a limit to how much you might want to test somebody. But if you think about the three sorts of tests you could potentially use, skills. So prove to me you're in my ballpark on the skills for this job. Technical knowledge. We can debate how much people need to know versus how much they can look up, but there's an amount that people need to just have in their brains. And then you've got personality, which is how they're going to fit with my team, how they're going to fit with co-workers and develop in their career, and particularly if they're, say, going to work remote. And then you've got that sort of core ability, raw thinking power. So how can they problem solve? Do they have the intellectual grunt particularly to advance? So if you're looking at hiring interns or whatever, that's probably you arguably don't expect them to know that much, but you want to make sure that they've got the ability to learn. So those are the sorts of testing that you can do. You're probably not going to want to use all of those for every candidate, because that's quite intense. But you can then walk into an interview, arguably, say if they've done a skills test before the interview, and go, I don't need to sit here and waste 10 minutes of this interview trying to find out whether they've got the technical knowledge, because who's got the power in the interview now? It's probably the candidate for many, especially probably any firms up to people who are outside the top 10. The candidate's got the power. They've probably got multiple opportunities if they're good. And you need to spend your interview time selling your firm, why would you want to come work here? Not probing them on whether they, can understand this piece of tax legislation or, some auditing standard or something.
Right.
So what if you're just a really bad tester? Like I feel like I would be super nervous if I walked in to an interview and all of a sudden there was like a test that they wanted me to take. I mean, I guess you'd give them a heads up ahead of time, but how are the candidates, from in your experience, how do they react? Are they like, oh yeah, this is great? Because they also might want to be a good fit and make sure that they have the skills. No, I mean, if I was the candidate, I wouldn't want to go apply for a position that I was going to feel lost or not do well in. But what are the candidates saying about this?
Yeah, look, and nobody likes to be tested. I think personality is one thing because there's no wrong answers, but
Right.
but ability or skills, yeah, nobody wants to be put on the spot. But we have all been through the processes of doing these things, and it's to some extent there's an expectation, and the upside to the candidate is they're not going to be eyeballed by a partner or a senior manager in the interview and asked technical questions, which is probably worse if you
More intimidating.
don't know the answer and you're just sitting across the table from them, versus like for our tests, they're all done at home, so people can be prepared before they do the test, get themselves to the point where they're ready. And look, Annie, I think you're right. People sort of want to make sure that this is going to be a good experience on both sides.
Yeah.
And I think, certainly the firms tell us if candidates don't want to be tested, they're going, well, actually, if they don't even want to tell us where they're at, they're not that serious about wanting to work here. Whereas, I think the upside for the candidate, if you're talking to them, is to go, we just want to know where you're at. This is not something that's going to cause you to get, excluded from the process. This is about knowing, where are you at technically, for example, so that when you come work for us, we can make sure that onboarding process is actually going to be the best for you. If you need a bit of help, you're not quite there, that's great, because what that means is when you come work for us, we're going to think about your training plan, who's going to mentor you, what are your first 90 days going to look like? And that's the way I think to turn it into a positive conversation with the candidate, rather than, just we're going to test you, and if you don't, hit a certain score,
pass or fail.
You
can't fail this. Well,
if you're a big four, for sure, they can afford to do that and afford to be picky. But
so, how do you come up with the questions? Like, how do you make the test? Was it just trial and error, or?
Yeah, it depends on the test, and so look, that's my job, I guess, and I'm still an accountant. So so obviously when we started in New Zealand, it was sort of easy because I knew the environment really, really well, and I could write a set of tests, to be fair, across corporate and public accounting without a lot of help, maybe other than the auditing ones, but. Beyond that, I guess we've had help from practitioners around the world, and particularly in the US, say with our tax tests, we've used expert groups of tax CPAs who've, mostly in smaller firms. So they're saying to us, I might propose, here's a whole list of topics we could cover. What do you think? And they'll come back and go, well, we'd really love to know if candidates had a good understanding of not so much the technology and things that the software does for them, but it's about, where would this particular item be in the return? Or, one of the favorites is people understanding sort of what does an S Corp election actually mean? How does that change? Is an S Corp an entity? Do they even get that it's not an entity?
Right.
And things like that. So it's about some of that sort of conceptual understanding of how it all comes together. But and the sort of questions that people, a client might just flick you an email or a text or get on the phone and ask you, and that's the stuff that the practitioners are saying that they want to get where the people are at that right level.
Yeah, because I'll show my age here. I actually had to do tax returns by hand, which required you to understand how things worked. And if you understood how it worked, it made it easier to explain to a taxpayer why certain things were happening. And we've all become so dependent on tax software
Well, yeah.
that I might not be able to explain something. I just know how to enter it in the software, which is a completely different skill than actually understanding the transaction and being able to then take that understanding and communicate well to a customer or potential customer. So, yeah, you forget about that, unless I think, because I remember I learned a lot about the tax code by just figuring out how to move it from one form to the other and what this form impacted that form. Right now, I just put some numbers in and it sends it wherever it needs to go. And my only job is to make sure I understand the end result.
Yeah, I mean, the software's even giving you diagnostics to help you along the way, or marking boxes. You had this number last year, don't forget it. I mean,
Yeah.
the softwares are really, which is fantastic. I mean, it's fantastic that the software is so advanced, but you're right. Having that understanding of why it's here and what does this mean, and how to explain it to a client is a whole nother story.
Yeah. Given there was nothing, when you looked and couldn't find anything, how long did it take, because you really didn't have anything to work with. It wasn't like you had somebody else's test to try to make it work better for your particular needs. But given there was nothing, I mean, how long a project was it to first of all identify the lack of resources, and then to start putting these things together, or to come if you had to come up with a new test? I mean, how long is the lead up to actually having a test that you're comfortable with would work in the marketplace?
It's we're getting a little better at it, but it's probably at least 6 months. Well, one of the biggest problems we have, of course, is getting people in practice to actually help us.
Yeah.
Because everybody's really busy, and
Yeah.
I get that. And so when you say to them, here's a question bank, or can you go on and try this, you can wait weeks for people to help you. But yeah, the first tests probably took us a year. And we didn't have a lot to work with. There were some tests out there, and there are still some other tests out there but they're, I guess, no one is 100% focused on public accounting, and that's really is, I think, our point of difference. But it does mean it's you end up dealing with people in public accounting and all the things that we know about how hard it is to get people's attention. So it's a labor of love, but I think it's for the profession. I guess part of my objective was to actually try and help firms get better, move faster, and for partners to have a better experience, because we haven't talked about the cost of getting it wrong, but as you would probably know, the cost, accountants in public accounting earn good money, so the financial cost is not insignificant, but the emotional toll is, when you're in practice, you want to serve clients, you want to work with them to help them solve their problems, and you want to build your team. You don't want stress of having to deal with underperformers and your team members coming to you going, Roger's no good. Why did you hire Roger? We should, why are you not dealing with this? And all the angst that goes with that. So that's the part that I think,
Well, and the time of onboarding, and then who's training and who's mentoring, and I feel like a lot of the time it's putting all the other work aside to focus on this new hire, to make sure that they are understanding their job role, are they qualified, training them, software, culture of the firm. And while you're doing that, something else is sitting on hold. So I don't know, how long does it take for you to realize the person's a fit or not a fit? I mean, I imagine everybody would, unless there was like something, very wrong with the candidate, that you'd probably at least give them 6 months to try to see how they're doing. So 6 months of time of working with someone, if it doesn't go right, and then you have to start over again, That can be.
Well, and then we're, usually hiring somebody because we need them desperately, and it was competitive to get them. How bad does it have to be before we finally are willing to say this just isn't working? Because we're so busy. It's just we let bad hires go too long just because we need them to do something. They're doing something, that if they leave, I have to do, is kind of our thought process. So we just we let them stay and stay and stay, and that's the real, to your point, Giles, the cost of a bad hire
Yeah.
can eat at us for a long time because we're just too slow to realize we made a bad hire, and that it might actually be better if I did it than to have somebody do it, and then I have to do it anyhow. But we're very slow because it was such a hard time to find the person. We know how busy it is. I mean, we're not good at admitting we made a mistake.
No, and how much did we all learn at college about mentoring people and coaching and all this stuff? It's we trained to be technicians, and that's there's a lot of people in the profession who've had no coaching about how to work with their team and get the best out of people. And we all need to learn more about that, and I think that's becoming increasingly what the profession is about. The technical knowledge. You need to know enough to be dangerous, but deep technical understanding is probably something that is going to become increasingly less important.
Yeah, because there are ways to learn the technical part of our business. I mean, and a lot of it changes. I mean, we're sitting here in the U.S. I mean, whatever tax law today may not be the law, a year from now. So you're in a constant learning mode when it comes to the technical side of the business. But you're right. I mean, gosh, how many HR courses or anything about, the value of teamwork? And we all could say the words, but do we really know what we're talking about? And do we just get so engulfed in the, again, the technical part that we miss maybe the most important thing? And maybe that's why we're having a hard time hiring, is because we don't present a very good place to work in. And
the soft skills, communication, teamwork, delegation. I mean, all of those things really do encompass a good employee. And I didn't take a course on that.
No, I mean, it's kind of like you either had it or you don't, and that's dangerous because, again, because if we're not good working with our staff, we're probably not really good working with our clients either. It's some of those are skills that translate beyond just your employees.
Maybe that's why they made me do so many group projects. I hated those group projects. There was always somebody who wasn't holding up their part of the bargain, or never on time with their part of the project. So maybe that's what that was for, now that I'm thinking about it.
Well, that's right. Or there was the person who just took over and didn't listen to anybody else,
right?
And just railroaded the group down in a direction that they wanted to go.
So is that the personality test? Can that kind of identify what kind of team player they are? Are they a leader? Are they a follower? Does the personality test really pull that kind of stuff out?
Yeah, that's right. And that's what I think that is probably, increasingly important. So what we did so we started with skills because that was the big gap, if you like, that we had. But then my co-founder, Steve Evans, has a background in testing and assessment. So that was sort of, he was able to help us build the assessments and the reporting and all that stuff. But he's got a particular interest in personality and had spent 25 years delivering various personality assessments through the businesses he worked with. So he worked with our psychology advisors to build a personality profile that's specific to accounting. So this was taking a study that came out of the UK, which identified 7 factors for success for accountants in the sort of modern environment, and 4 of those you could measure by using a personality profile. So those were ethics, relationships, thinking, and coping. So, you can sort of look at those and go, we can understand why those are key factors to success. So we built a personality profile that focused on those particular areas. And so so it's a big five model, which is, if you like, the ones with the good science.
Right.
So you don't end up, to be fair, with characterizing somebody as an animal or a color or whatever. It's there's like there are 14 factors that they work through, and we sort of built a profile covering those. But what you can then do is go, what does an ideal profile look like for different roles? So if you're familiar, say, with the finder, minder, grinder concept, so that's, in an accounting firm, you've got finders being the people who find the work, ultimately become firm leaders. The minders are the client accounting managers, so they're sort of managing the work and managing the team, and then the grinders being the people doing the work, the staff accountants and the senior tax associates. And so you can go, well, here's a model profile for each of those positions. Where does this person look like on the personality profile they've filled in, and where are the biggest gaps? So what we do then is help people with the interview questions based on where are the gaps and what are the things. What would you want to dig into with this person at the interview? Because any personality profile only tells you how somebody prefers to work. It doesn't tell you how they do work. So where the interview really comes into its own is understanding what are their coping mechanisms, or how do they actually operate in practice, even though, for example, if they're like me, they want to work in the back room and not talk to anybody all day. That's what my personality profile says about me. But I know that I can't be a success if I do that. So how do I then operate on a day-to-day level? And that's we help people with the questions on that. So it's about sort of that digging in.
Yeah, because I found you sent us in preparing for this, you sent us, I think, the results of a test that might even been yours that was in all these different categories, and I found it fascinating reading kind of the beginning of what this is supposed to. Maybe it's just saying this is the ideal person. Then it would say this is kind of where we found you to fit in this thing. And I'm one that's always thought that good communicators can overcome a lot of things if you can communicate well. So I'm not going to read what it said about you, but I found it fascinating under the communication style that it said, emotionally intelligent leaders consider the weight of their words before speaking them. That's something a lot of people could learn in a lot of areas, accounting or somewhere else. Using tact and diplomacy when conveying sensitive information to others, and striving to avoid making negative impression on others. That's, I guess I read that to say that's what communication style you should have. And I found that particularly important because, again, I'm a big advocate that communication is important. But that first line about kind of think before you speak, don't engage your mouth till your brain is engaged is great advice. And you can go through a lot of other areas, but I thought it was particularly fascinating. And I'm sure I would love to be able to ask the people how they reacted to seeing how they perceived what the test
I
said
want to
about
see. I
them.
want to take it. I want to see what what it says, what I should be doing or how I'm doing, because it would probably indicate areas where I could use improvement. More of like a personal development or team development skill. I could see the personality test being worked. If you have a team of people working on a certain project, how knowing what their personalities are like to see how they would react when in the team. I think it'd be cool.
Would it be, I mean, to Annie's point, is this something that you would, I don't know if you thought about giving it to your current employees just to kind of see what kind of mix and match group you actually have? And can it be instructive and help people that you already hired? And maybe they've been with you for 10 years and none of us are perfect, but learning something like that, is that a valid use for testing like this as well as hiring?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So we started with hiring with this, but we have adapted the test itself doesn't change depending on what use you want to use it for, because it's just a review of somebody's working style, but it's the reporting that you can change. So the one that you saw was what we call our Pathway to Partnership report. So that is absolutely for people um, who are already working for you. It's really, if you like, for emerging leaders in particular, so anybody from sort of manager upwards, where it's a conversation opener. It's like, here's where you sit. Here's your preferred working style. Here's an ideal for a firm leader. Again, where are the gaps? Let's discuss with your coach or the managing partner or whoever you're working with, what are some things that we can do to help you get to where you want to be in with the least amount of effort and stress.
Right.
And when I took that and showed you the results, so that was my one, and I'm a long way away from the ideal in quite a few categories, as you would have seen.
I'm sure we all are.
But and I still became partner at PwC, so clearly I was able to cope. But to be honest, if we'd have had something like that and a coach who could help you talk through some of those things, it would have helped me develop my coping strategies a lot more easily. Maybe targeted some short training in some of those areas, which I never got. So I just ended up having to sort of bootstrap it and learn it as I went. And the end result of that, of course, was that it was stressful because I was, trying to work it out on the fly, if you like. Whereas to have some structure around it, and to have particularly if there's a coach who really understands these things and can you're meeting them regularly and can help you, I think it would, it can make a huge difference to people who are willing to open their mind to the fact that they're not perfect, and there are better ways that they can work with people, and they can learn from their mistakes, because we all make
Sure.
mistakes. So there's like, well, this didn't go well, what's my learning? How can I do that better next time? And to be honest, some people are good at that and will take on board that feedback and work with it, and some people just will they're a rhinoceros. They'll just put their head down and just carry on.
Yeah.
Constructive criticism is something hard for,
Yeah.
some people take it well and some don't. So
What
Yeah.
I find interesting as you were talking, there's you designed this for the big firms that, to attain, partner level. But we are having a huge problem in the smaller firms in our industry of succession planning. What am I going to
Mhm.
do when my time comes? And we've always told people that obviously the easiest way to have succession planning is to have that successor internal to your firm. And this could help both identify in the hiring process and identify after you have hired them the people who might be both willing and able to be a successor, so you could start that coaching, and instead of having to go out in the marketplace and try to find a buyer,
Mm.
develop it and use it for internal development. And in looking through this, I'm sure you might tweak it some, but I think it could have great application even in smaller firms that are, don't just hire somebody to get me through tax season. Hire somebody to get me through 15 tax seasons
Right.
and then buy me out so I don't have to go through the 16th.
Yeah, I guess when you find that perfect candidate, it's competitive. I'm sure other people find that perfect candidate for themselves. And so now you're in a price war and a work-life balance war and a benefits, this kind of thing. I think it's hard to be in the position of finding that person for the longevity and being able to afford them.
But I might overpay for the person who is
Yeah.
in this
That's what I was about to
for the
say.
long haul and would
Yeah.
love to one day, move into my office and take over. I'd like to know who that person is. And so I treat them that way so they don't leave me because I've shown them no interest in their ultimate goals. which is
Future,
to
yeah.
be in business for themselves. And yet I never identified that as part of their skill level or their desires. And so they left me and bought somebody else's firm, and I'm out there trying to find a buyer. And I had one down the hall. So, I don't know if I would tweak it, but I think I can see this as having multiple uses. I got to ask you this question when you're talking about accountants. There is that stereotypical opinion of everybody, how they view us. Are they right?
You mean nerds?
Yeah.
Bean counters?
Yeah, no personality, they're more backward looking than forward looking. They're not risk takers. They don't want to take a risk. They'll tell you 1 and 1 equals 2, but they won't think about what it could be, if it was something, do the tests validate that, or is that just a stereotypical?
Yeah, so is that the introverted accountant who looks at their own shoes and the extrovert accountant who looks at your shoes?
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
Yeah.
So yeah, you go to a party and tell them that you're an accountant, and it's like the only thing worse than that is that you're a retired accountant.
Yeah. Nobody wants to talk to you. Well, this guy's no fun. No. let's go find somebody.
Not unless I've got a tax issue I want to talk about. But
right.
So you're right in that. Look, accountants do have a personality, and it actually is not that far different to, if you like, the norm. So if you were talking salespeople, that's complete. That
right.
is quite
That's
different. But if you're looking at the norm, it's and surprisingly, the differences are not so much around that extroversion introversion area. It's conscientiousness is significantly higher amongst accountants, and you'd expect that. So people who want to look at the detail, want to get stuff right. That's sort of not surprisingly. But also the fact that we are often not that change focused, so we're not necessarily as open to new things. And again, some of those are strengths.
Oh, sure.
Because we operate in an environment where you don't want to be a risk taker and be trying something new.
And you do want to get it right.
Yeah, that's right. So I think in general we are pretty normal. We probably need to talk up what we do a little bit, and be proud of the part that we play in society. We're a really important resource, and so often the only person that our clients can talk to about what is beyond their marriage is probably the most thing that can make or break success for them.
Yeah, I think that's why I focused on communication. I think sometimes we hurt ourselves in that all those things are great strengths, but the way we communicate our knowledge, when someone starts trying to explain to me by using code sections of the IRS code, and it's like, I'm sorry, can you just speak English to me? And I think sometimes our communication weaknesses, which is why I focused on that when I looked at that test, plays into the stereotypes, where our strengths are kind of masked because we're such poor communicators that you sit there and go, come on, man, tell me what, answer my question. Don't quote to me the IRS code, because if I knew what the IRS code said, I wouldn't be here.
Well, that's right. And having actual conversations rather than trying to communicate some of the stuff by email. And I think, and that's not an accounting thing, but I think you look at the college graduates now, and this is they're afraid to pick up the phone. And that's we can't afford to be there, because AI will eat our lunch if it's about
exactly
that sort of more formal communication. It's that two-way listening. Does this person understand what I'm saying to them? Being able to see the body language and realize that actually this is not sinking in, or they're not getting it, and being able to circle around and go, I need to explain this in a different way.
Yeah, no, I think being able to read people when you're talking to them and communicating in a style that is comfortable and understandable to them. Because email, just words on a piece of paper
You're
in an
texting. I
email.
mean, everything is texting. It's, shooting a message here. You don't even pick up the phone. You just text or email. And now it's all these, acronyms. It's not even full sentences. It's shortcutting, how to say, certain things. It's just very impersonable. And I think that when you're a business owner, you want to talk to somebody, not just get an email with, your figures for this month, so to say. So I see that. I do see that.
And I think it hurts, and even in coworkers. I mean, something that drives me
Yeah.
crazy is to get a Teams or a text or an email from somebody 2 doors down. And, it's and it's gonna take me longer to read it and respond to it than if they had just walked, 20 feet and we could have a conversation. It's permeating our entire way we work with others. And, the only phone they're not scared of is the one they carry around with them all the time.
Yeah.
But, I think that, we've all, I think, got to guard against this inability to have just person-to-person discussions. I think that's invaluable, and it's a skill that I'm afraid we're losing to some extent.
But AI will take over if we don't,
yeah.
as a profession, deal with that, because that's what that sort of personal relationship is. And if the client doesn't want and value that personal relationship, they're probably not going to be a client for very long, and they will be attracted to an organization that can provide that information via a bot or whatever, and they're not people that we can serve as a profession. But most people are not like that, and most people want somebody to lean on and talk to, and that as a profession we need to embrace that, because that is the only thing that we're going to have that makes us different from technology.
Yeah, because technology is, at the end of the day, if it comes to doing a tax return or answering a question, I mean, our technology, AI, should all get to the same results. It's how the results are delivered that we need to separate ourselves, how we ask the questions to get the right information, and then how we deliver the results. But we don't control the results. I mean, the results are whatever the math tells us they are, or the law tells us it is. But we can, to your point, can differentiate ourselves in how we receive and return that information in a way that AI, well, I won't say never can do, but today it can't do it.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Before, I want to have an interesting discussion about our tax systems in the U.S. and New Zealand.
That's what I was going to say.
Before we get to that, because we've talked a lot about it, tell everybody about your company. How do they contact you? What's the, what do they need to know if this is something that they want to get in touch with you or your company? What do they need to know? And whatever you think, make your little sales pitch here before we move on to comparing the tax systems of our two countries.
So what I'd say is, if testing is something that you're interested in, jump onto our website, accountests.com. You can choose a test based on the job description that you've got if you're talking about skills. So we've got some help options on there to make sure that you get a test that's going to work for the candidate. Everything's done online, so you go in, you buy the test through the website, you get a link, you send the link to the candidate. The candidate does the test at home with their camera is on. So they need to do it on a laptop. The camera's on. There's an AI that's watching them while they do the test, essentially making sure they don't cheat, so they can't. Because this is the reality. Is it's very easy to do that. So if they tab away, if they're looking away, they're looking at a different device, or in fact, even is it the same person that I interviewed who's doing the test? This is the reality. So you get that protection through the process of them doing the test to make sure that it was done, in a fair manner, so that you can then have faith in the results. When they've completed the test, most of them are 40 minutes, 40 questions, 40 minutes. When they hit submit on that, within about a second, you'll get a report or a link to the report coming into your inbox, and you can then have a look at the report with the resources that we've got, and also the proctoring report to tell you whether they did it in a fair manner. So it's all designed so that you can do it really quickly.
Yeah, it seems very streamlined.
And arguably, if you've say had a job out there, you've done a phone screen, you've got the testing done, and you go to that first interview, you can have all of that done within 2 or 3 days. And we would probably say, if you did all this stuff before first interview, why would you need a second interview? What are you going to uncover in a second interview that you couldn't have uncovered by a good first interview?
Good first interview.
And if you can follow that sort of process, you could be making an offer in a week or less than a week. And that's and Roger, you're talking about the fact that people have options, and why they're going to come work for you. If you put the first offer in front of them, and you can sell it in terms of the way that they can come work for you and what you're going to do for them, you'd have to say you should be in the box seat, so to speak, in terms of having an opportunity to negotiate a deal with that candidate before somebody else does, particularly if you realize that they're actually very good and a really good fit for what you're doing. Is like, somebody else is going to work this out if I don't do it.
Right. Sometimes being first matters.
Yeah.
Get that offer in first, and they say yes, and you get them in your building and get them working for you, then usually it's too late for that second or third offer. So, yeah.
Well,
So accountests.com, and everything's pretty much right there for them.
Yeah.
I will say the website is very thorough, a lot of information, easy to navigate. So if you're interested, just check out the website. You'll probably be overwhelmed with how wonderful the product is, and the testing works, and how easy it is to get started.
All right, let's move into this dream that has been talked about in the United States for years, that people will no longer have to file a tax return. And everybody says that's impossible. So tell me how it works for you. What is filing a tax return or mean in New Zealand?
So New Zealand is lucky in that it's, we're 5.3 million, so a mid-sized sort of state level, and it isn't. There's no state taxes, if you like, because we're just one entity. So that makes it easier. 90% of people in New Zealand don't file a tax return because if you're a wage and salary earner, maybe with some interest and dividend income, the Inland Revenue, so I'll call it the IRS because that's it's the Inland Revenue Department here, but the IRS has all of that information because it's provided to them by the banks and by the employers. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the year, they will send you it's like a tax summary. It's like, this is based on the information we have. This is what we think that you owe or that we need to refund to you. If you agree with that, do nothing, and we'll just send you the bill or send you the money. If you don't agree with it or have extra information that you need to provide, then obviously get in contact with us. And tell us what's wrong. So that's 90% of the people. So the only people who are filing returns are people who have income that is like self-employed income, rental income,
right?
A business of some sort,
and business owners. So that makes it in terms of what are accountants doing. Accountants are not doing individual taxes other than for people who've got rental properties. So everybody else is in business, if you like. There are no deductions. That's probably the biggest difference. So we used to have a few, and 20 years ago the government legislated them away. So there's no deductions to claim. So from that point of view,
That makes it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I look at the your tax system, and as a tax professional, it brings a level of excitement because there's so many things that so many ways you can add value as a tax pro in the US.
Yeah.
Because there's always different ways of looking at a problem.
Because of the complexity of the law, because
Yeah.
because it's ever changing, and one day you're doing this and one day you can't. So
Yeah, because when you started description, I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, well, the IRS knows how much everybody's W-2 is. They know how much the banks and interest are. It's all that. There's two things. I think there's well, I don't think the IRS's technology is probably as good as what you have with your agency. They're behind there. Then there's the distrust of a lot of people that they wouldn't get it right, or that somehow the government's going to rip me off or something, before you even get to complexity. But the U.S., I don't know if it's 90%, but I would bet, and there's been this talk of why can't we do that? And I think some of it's just the politicians are never going to keep it simple enough. They just, it's like right now, I mean, we're trying to figure out how to not tax tips and not tax overtime and not tax and make car interest on American cars deductible. Not because that's necessarily good policy, but it won an election. So we've got to complicate our tax code for things that, you guys just don't think about.
I think the politicians in New Zealand have been very clear for a long time that you don't drive social outcomes through tax policy. You separate the two. You collect the money and then target it at the places you want to send it to. You don't use the tax system and the tax system's often a very blunt instrument with these things, because you end up benefiting people who you want to benefit and a whole lot of other people who you didn't want to benefit, who can ride on the coattails of whatever you've done. So,
did your tax system change dramatically during the pandemic?
No.
Did it change at all?
No.
I mean, there's no telling how many laws and things, and unintended consequences, well-being. Well-intended maybe is a better way to say it, but the complexity and to your point, the people who benefited that weren't intended to benefit from it. I think it's a psychology, and just a way of life. I don't think technically what you have is impossible for us to do, but I'm just not sure we can ever get there as a society and accept that we're just going to let the IRS tell us how we did last year. I don't.
Yeah.
But I think there's a role for the profession to advocate for some of these things. And for example, so checks, no, there haven't been checks. The IRS here haven't sent out a check for probably 10 years at least.
Yeah.
So, that's a simplification, and I know that's coming now, September 30 or whatever it is.
Yeah, and everybody's all mad about it. I mean, there's people that are furious. What do you mean I can't get a check?
and in a year's time, people will go, why did we even make such a fuss?
Yeah.
Well, I remember when e-file became a thing and nobody wanted to do it. And then all of a sudden it's like, I have to file on paper? I have to do what? I have to go to the post office? So times change. Yeah.
I mean, it's, I've been asked a couple of times to testify before Congress. And I always tell them, I said, your goal should be to put me out of business. Thank you for not doing that. This bill will be like the Accountants Employment Act, because they'll be just enough different that they'll need us more than ever. And, look, I'm thankful for it. It's provided, this company and me a great living, but it's not necessarily fair for the average person to have to pay somebody a lot of money just to comply with their tax obligation. And I'm sure I just lost half of our listening audience by saying that. but I mean, I think there's plenty of room for us to be profitable and, like you said, giving advice and helping plan and doing all those sorts of things, and not having to charge people outrageous sums of money to do something that the government already has all the information on. So you at least prove it's possible. I don't think it's ever going to happen here, but it is
Maybe not.
proof that it's possible. So I'm not, I could say you should goals to put me out of business because I'm not too worried that they're going to ever do that. If anything, they're going to just enhance our needs. So, so all you listeners, you can come back next time, and you can continue to listen. I'm not going to advocate that we all get put out of business. It would be a wonderful world if we could make the same money and work less, but doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Well, Roger, I do think our next podcast is going to be a really good one. Just saying, come back next time.
Yes, we will prove beyond reasonable doubt that the IRS and our needs are never going away. So, this has been great. Thank you. I mean, I think this is a resource. I hope our listeners will take advantage of what you're offering out there, because hiring is such a big problem, and gosh, you really want to get it right.
Expensive.
You really do want to get it right the first time if you can. You're never going to get it perfect, but I think sometimes our bigger mistakes is making a bad hire as opposed to not making one at all. Any final words, Annie, or anything we need to do?
No, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining us. I know our listeners probably enjoyed it just as much.
Yeah, and it's great. And go check out his website. And thank you. And hope I don't even know what day or time it is there, but I hope we didn't keep you up too late or cause you to miss breakfast or whatever is going on. But this has been terrific. And thank you so much for taking this hour and talking to our folks about it. And I'm sure you will have helped a lot of people in the profession make that next important hire. So, Giles, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll get to see you in person next time you're over here. I know we just missed you in Arizona. So hopefully you'll be around Annie or I, and we can get a chance to meet face to face.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roger, and thanks, Annie. It's been a pleasure, and as I said at the beginning, it's great to talk tax again. I don't get too many opportunities to do that these days.
That's right.
So
well, you're welcome back to talk taxes anytime. This podcast will talk taxes. I can promise you that. But thank you, and Annie, as always, thank you. It's always fun to do these things. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast and tell your friends about it. And bring them back. And thank you for listening. Annie, Giles, thank you for joining me. And we will be back soon with another Federal Tax Update podcast. Goodbye, everyone.